it worked out for the best. Do you think that about us? Do you think people look at you and I and they're like, yeah, that's weird, but it works?
It's interesting because I think in terms of personality, people say that, but I've had quite a number of people come and say, there's a girl who works from midday and she sounds just like you. And I thought, really? Okay.
Have we got accents?
I don't know. Maybe you need to, go a little bit bouquet. You know what I mean? Yeah.
10:09 is your time on Gabs FM, powered to engage your world. Good evening and welcome to the greatest nighttime radio show on the air right now. It's called the Purple Playroom and it's hosted by myself. I go by the name WolfLikeRoss and I host it with my good friend and colleague, Ms. Cathy Malejane, otherwise known on the streets as Curious Cath. If you're new here, let's start by offering you a big, warm, loving welcome. This is the show about sex because if it's about sex, we're talking about it, all right? And this evening's episode is quite special because it is a long overdue conversation for us here on the Purple Playroom, right? We are talking about sexual trauma, but not any kind of sexual trauma, or not only sexual trauma at that, but, intimacy after sexual trauma. How does it work? Because we expect that once you've gone through a trauma, you would want to reintegrate into your life the way it was either before or the way you would want it to be afterwards. And for a lot of people, that includes factoring in or reintroducing intimacy. But it is not always an easy task and it can be incredibly triggering, all right? So I would like to put out a trigger warning before we start and before we introduce our guests. We've got two guests, one joining us via a voice clip as well as one joining us in studio. So I would like to offer a trigger warning to anybody who has encountered or experienced sexual assault before, to say that this conversation might bring up one or two things that you might have gone through. So that disclaimer is out there. Good evening, Cathy.
How are you doing, Ross?
I can't complain, my friend. How are you? It's been a busy one.
It has been. It's interesting how this year is starting off busy.
Yeah. But it's a huge blessing.
Yeah. No, I'm very thankful and excited. And, we came up with the concepts for the Purple Playroom, Ross, because we need to have these conversations. And I know a lot of people sometimes are like, what? You're on radio that late? Why are you doing this? But I want to believe that today's conversation is one of the wise, because there are, our statistics in Botswana will show you that we have sexual assault. We lead in terms of the statistics of sexual assault in the world, not just in Africa. Yeah. And so it is very relevant for us to be having these conversations. So a huge thank you to our guests. Like you said, one of them is in studio.
And we will be introducing her in a little bit. We're very excited to have her. Stunning lady. Yeah. And, she always wears a particular color because it's her favorite color, and it looks stunning on her. So you will meet her in just a few moments. But right now we want to introduce a contributor to our show who has so graciously agreed from his perspective as a trauma counselor, and a counselor in general who's dealt with cases of sexual trauma, to answer a few questions for us.
Yeah, and he's actually somebody who runs a trauma counseling center, and they offer different services. They have trauma counseling, self-exploration sessions, pre- and post-marital counseling, grief counseling, as well as stress management. He goes by the name Kingdom Kebaitse, and we had a bit of a chat with him, Ross. We would like to start off with him just laying the ground with us with that chat.
100%. So what you can look forward in Kingdom's voice clip here is he asks these questions because, we're ladies who are full of questions. What is the appropriate age and style when it comes to teaching children about consent? I believe in a separate show we can actually delve into the topic of consent, and we plan to, Cathy. What does he think is the most important thing that people should remember as well when someone shares a difficult experience with them? And then sometimes trauma responses can appear in ways people don't expect. They manifest in, some of the most strangest ways, such as hypersexuality, right? So can he explain what some survivors, or why some survivors might experience that? And then lastly, how can people differentiate between healthy sexual exploration as opposed to trauma-driven behavior? So I think we can just about right now cue him in. Cool?
All right.
Thank you again, Mr. Kingdom, for joining us here at the Purple Playroom. So this week we're discussing sexual trauma at the Purple Playroom, and we want to understand from an expert's perspective on, just certain teachings as well in terms of how we can better educate ourselves and support one another when we have people who are experiencing trauma. So my first question to you is, what is an appropriate age and style when it comes to teaching children about consent? What do you think the most important thing people people should remember when someone shares a difficult experience with them as well?
Yeah, the issue of consent, you'll be surprised if I say that conversation needs to start as early as 3 years old.
Yes.
But not necessarily direct towards sex. It should be just simple interaction like physical attraction. Your child should see you initiating a hug, initiating a kiss, and they should know that it's okay for them to say no if they don't want to hug that day, or they don't want to kiss that particular day. Then if they know, or they establish those boundaries, they know they can say no, then they know that this is their body, and they have a right to say no when they want to say no, but they do also have a right to say yes when they want to say yes to that simple hug. But as they grow a little bit older, I think between the ages of 5 up to around 12, I think that's when we teach them consent in terms of now they are more in social interactions because they'll be at school.
Yes.
The issues of how do they share toys with others? How do they invade others' personal space? They have to learn consent in those areas.
Yes.
And then as they become closer and closer to teenagehood, around I think towards 11ish, 12ish, that's when now you teach them more about emotional stuff and even online interactions to say, online you don't just send people stuff, you have to ask for permission.
Yes.
You don't invade people's privacy by just sending them the wrong stuff. Recently we're dealing with a very sensitive information where like a young girl was busy sending everybody in the school nudes, and this was in a primary school. So we have to teach them that you have to get permission from others. You don't just go out there and invade their space, even digitally.
Yes.
And even emotionally, to say, what are people's boundaries emotionally?
Yes.
Do you know how to sense other people's emotions, and you know how to work with that without invading their space?
Yes.
Yeah, and then finally that's when we can teach them now about intimacy. To say even with intimacy, you have to learn that people, they must consent. Everything that we have taught you from a time that you were a little child in terms of boundaries, it comes into play to say even intimacy, it's not automatic. The other person has to agree. They have to be in a place where they are willing to go into that with you, where they are willing to actually do that with you. It doesn't just happen, and you don't impose.
Yes.
So at teenagehood, that's where they are now more romantic. They're learning romance and those kinds of things.
Okay.
And we have to teach them that even at that age, they don't impose. There must be a high level of concern from both parties.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, sir.
Yeah.
And what would you say the most important thing for people to remember, especially when somebody's sharing that they've had a sexual sort of traumatic experience? What's something that we as a community should remember and keep in mind when someone is sharing their story?
I think one of the big things is the stigma that surrounds that whole thing.
Yes.
To say this somebody is coming to you with a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. They're probably very uncomfortable sharing this.
Yes.
And there's a high level of forgiving that needs to happen and deep inner healing. That person definitely will not come out of that unless they go and sit down with a specialist, a therapist. And sometimes one thing that is uncomfortable to know is that even if it's a situation where there was sexual violence, perpetrators of this violence, sometimes they are themselves broken. And you must know that these people also, to some levels, to some degree, need help. They need therapy.
Yes.
So we must look at it from both ends. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. And in terms of trauma responses, a lot of the time, trauma can show up in ways that people do not expect it to show up.
Yeah.
So, for example, with hypersexuality, are you able to explain why some survivors may experience this response to trauma? Because you find that some people are very hypersexual after having experienced sexual trauma. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, one of the things we must acknowledge about trauma is that it breaks the soul. Soul, we're talking about mind, will, emotions. So if you are a victim of sexual trauma, and you have experienced maybe say rape or molestation, that experience is going to break you. And if that soul fragment that has been broken by that experience does not heal, it might want to experience more and more of that sexual experience.
Yes.
To say, one day on social media, I saw a young lady who was talking about they got raped, but after that, they feel like they have a fantasy about a lot of like rough sexual intercourse. And when I read that, I realized it's not the core human being who's talking. It's a fragment of the soul that has not healed from that experience, and it needs to be fed. It has a lot of lust. So a part of her has broken off from that experience, and unless she heals and comes back to herself, she'll need much more of that sexual encounter, unfortunately. But if it was not, let's say, sexual trauma, if it was just another trauma, it could be anything else. It could be drugs, it could be alcohol. But since we are narrowing it down to the sex trauma, that's what's really happening there. Yeah.
Oh, okay, wow. Thank you for that insight and understanding. And finally, Mr. Kingdom, how can people differentiate between healthy sexual exploration and trauma-driven behavior?
Okay, well, healthy sexual exploration, there will be definitely intimacy. There will be consent. Partners will be free to explore each other in the way that they want to be intimate with each other. They want to express love.
Wow.
Okay? But if it's just the wilding out, or it's wild behavior, or it's a trauma response, oftentimes it's done as a coping mechanism. And some people, they numb their emotions when they do that because they are doing that to respond to a trauma situation. There's a trauma that happened that was not dealt with. So this is just a coping mechanism. It's just a release.
Yes.
And oftentimes it does not involve that intimacy. Oftentimes there will be a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of regret. Then these people also, they have a tendency of wanting to have multiple different sexual partners.
Yes.
And they have a lot of irrational appetite for sex. Then you know that they are feeding a demon. Something is not right somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's really that's where the difference is.
Wow, thank you so much for that. And for this conversation, I feel like I've learned a lot from it, and also just the spiritual element of it as well, just being highlighted. Sometimes there's this hunger that is coming from a traumatic standpoint. And I think that it's important for us to understand where these things come from as a people so we can continue to educate ourselves and also be able to heal. So thank you for that, Mr. Kingdom.
Oh, you're most welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's crazy that this entire song is about sex. But if you hear a song about sex today, the words are so profane and,
they're pretty explicit.
It's so explicit.
Yeah. Back in the day, yes, there were a couple of explicit ones, but a lot of songs were pretty sexual, but they were so sugar-coated that I think for me, it was actually way later that I realized, wait, what was I singing about here?
But this one you knew, they're talking about freaking you.
Huh? No, this one.
Yeah, 100%. This is Jodeci with Freaking You, bringing us to 22 minutes past 10. Welcome back to the Purple Playroom. This is a show hosted by WolfLikeRoss and Cathy Malejane. My name is Ross. That beautiful girl over there is named Cathy, and it's the show about sex, because if it's about sex, we're talking about it, right? This evening's episode, we are about to introduce our main guest, but thank you so much to our producer, Masa, otherwise known as Mace with the Face, for sitting down with trauma counselor Kingdom and understanding a few things. What's the appropriate age to be teaching children about consent? What does enthusiastic consent sort of look like, as well as some of the things surrounding those topics, right? So we appreciate his contribution immensely. What this episode is meant to do tonight is to inform, to validate your experience as well if you've been through sexual trauma and are struggling with intimacy post that experience, to empower you and not just focus on the trauma itself. We're not here to sit down, right? It's supposed to be very empathetic on our part, and we are looking to offer practical guidance at the end of this conversation, as well as hope and healing.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like you're saying, Ross, we're not trying to trigger anyone, though we understand that you can be triggered. And this is my new thing, that triggers are actually blessings because they give you an opportunity to see where you haven't yet healed. So I'm so excited to have this woman next to us because I think she practices what she preaches. And she was actually just saying to me before we came here, I think earlier today or yesterday, that I want to see, what's still triggering me and what else I still need to heal. Because I think we all understand that healing is not a linear journey. You don't say, oh no, I've had 10 therapy sessions, so I'm good, I'm healed, right? Yeah. So this is, our ode to people who've had this happen to them. And we're saying, let's hold hands and let's figure out how you can get past whatever triggers come up, whatever challenges you face.
Please go ahead, on that note, and introduce our guest.
Well, our guest, I must say, is somebody that I believe is living her purpose. She goes by the name of Pearl Ncube. She's affectionately known as Miss Pearl. You're going to know this name at some point very soon. She's a qualified counselor. She's a life coach. She's a neuro-linguistic practitioner. She's a trauma-informed counselor, and she's got over 15 years of experience in civil society. And she is deeply committed to holistic community development as well as empowerment. Now, way back in 2019, she founded Ratong Center, which is a justice enterprise. It's dedicated to the psychosocial as well as to the psychoeconomic empowerment of survivors, that is, of gender-based violence, trauma, as well as recovering substance addicts. Since its inception, Ratong Center has actually managed to empower over 60 women. And, initially it was women only, but right now she is expanding to offer this service to men as well. She does offer counseling at Ratong Center. I wasn't aware about this, for free, right? So if you have problems and issues, and we were talking about this just 2 weeks ago with Cindy, to say, if you look at yourself and you don't love yourself, get help. So Ratong Center 100%. Is one of the places that you can get help. So we have Miss Pearl in studio.
Hello, Miss Pearl.
Hello. It is so nice to be here.
We're so excited to have you. Thank you for agreeing.
Most welcome.
It's interesting. It's interesting. She's wearing purple, and there's a purple light on her. So when I look at her eyelashes are looking purple.
This is the second time I've met her, and she's been wearing purple, since back to back to back to back. So we're really glad to have you. Cathy and I think we thank our guests on this show at least 20 times during their time with us, because one, it's very late in the night.
Yeah.
Two, we talk about the most audacious things that I'm sure, you through your practice at Ratong discuss as well. So we're really grateful that you would bring that expertise and lend us that expertise. So thank you again for joining us on the Purple Playroom, right? So we like to get the silly questions out of the way, or what, we might think of as stupid questions, just because we don't like to assume people know things or don't know things, right? Yeah. So maybe let's start at the beginning, Pearl, and say, or rather talk about how many people just assume they know what sexual assault or sexual trauma means or where it comes from, right? Either rape or, a violent assault, a molestation, things of that nature. But from your experience as a trauma-informed counselor as well, what actually counts as sexual trauma, sexual assault? Why do many survivors struggle to recognize that they have been assaulted?
That's a very good question, Ross. And I also just want to add on to that I am also a sexual trauma survivor.
Right.
So I have lived the experience both through my work and also in my life. Yeah. So when I speak on issues like this, I'm very passionate about it because I have been there and I still work with people who are in this experience and struggling to come out of it. But to get back to your question, sexual trauma, maybe just to put the two words separately.
Emma.
Trauma, it's the shadows of an experience that one has lived.
Okay.
So it's not the actual experience, but it's the echoes. Yes, ditamorago. And a lot of times, the reason why survivors or somebody who has experienced that struggle to recognize it, sometimes it's because of shame.
Yeah.
Especially in our young men, where we know that people think it's not right to get a consent from a man.
Or it's not necessary.
It's not necessary. So you have the shame, but it catches up later on through your other experiences, sexual experiences and interaction. Then you realize that, wait, the last time, I wanted to touch or to be touched, somebody pushed me before they touched me and I didn't like it and I felt this way.
Yeah.
That is when you recognize it.
Yeah.
And yes, and other times also it's because of fear of maybe the person who has sexually assaulted you.
Yeah.
Fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what the system is like. We don't know what the processes are.
Or what emotionally you're going to go through once you accept I've been wronged. So you change the narrative in your head to say, no, that
It's
wasn't
just that
assault.
much easier to do that.
100%.
It's easier to keep quiet. It's easier to walk away. It's easier to shadow it than to come out and speak about it.
Yeah.
Yes. So, those are the two main things that we normally see. But there's various reasons why people fail to acknowledge or identify that they have been sexually assaulted.
So when we go back to the first part of the question is, what may we not think of as sexual assault but actually is?
Yeah.
Yes, that's a very interesting one because I am, as a survivor, I always thought my first experience with sexual trauma was when I actually got raped at 17. But when I lived through other people's experiences and hearing their stories, I realized that even the touching, the not
unsolicited,
Yes.
Yeah.
The harogola, go tshwarwa mabele nyana, ke bo ankele, to be tapped or spanked ko morago, and you didn't consent for that and you don't like that because you have been told, oh maragonyana, you don't know whether that is good to be maragonyana or that is wrong.
It kind of just is normal as long as, somebody's not performing, a bedroom sexual act with you where now your private
so sexual
parts are
trauma
involved.
can also come from not the actual physical penetration, interaction, intimacy.
Yeah.
It can also come from the words.
Yeah.
Yes, just being told,
That's sexual assault?
Yes. Because that is bringing an emotion, that can affect somebody's confidence, that can bring doubt to someone, and it may affect them later on in life.
So we can't just construe it as bullying. It's still sexual assault.
Still like sexual assault.
As long as it's a sexual comment, then
it's a sexual
goes
comment. Yes,
from bullying to sexual assault.
Exactly.
Yeah. So umukima is bullying. Umukima otla imela monna is sexual assault.
It's sexual assault.
Okay.
I actually also, just to share my other experience that I was a cardiac patient when I was very young. So I grew up kinani sihuba
okay.
Before I had my open heart operation. And there's a lot of times where people said, wow, because I didn't know
yeah, you were young.
To a point where even when I was dating, but I always hid my scar because of those weights. I always shied away from opening up because I thought, maybe I'm not going to be good enough
I actually want to just go on that one because the question of batho ba tla reng, that shame, that blame is something that really happens a lot in Botswana, where we see, well, I don't know if it's Botswana alone, but where we see a lot of victim blaming, and then you do see a lot of victims actually carrying that blame, carrying the shame, and blaming themselves. I want to find out to say, why is it that blame is such that self-blame is such a common psychological response to this violence?
Because firstly, trauma breaks one's confidence. So once your confidence is broken out, you start feeling like you're unworthy, and you blame yourself. I will also share another experience of when I was raped. Instead of knowing, I knew that it was wrong, but for a long time I blamed myself.
Why was I
out at night?
Yeah.
What was I doing? Why didn't
I make him feel like he was entitled to it?
So you carry blame for a very long time because you do not have the confidence. And especially us who grew up in days and times where reporting a rape case, the first thing is, so it was very easy for us to carry the blame. And for a very long time, because you would start feeling like, if you are wearing, we still hear it now, where people make comments on social media about a woman who's dressed up in a short skirt.
You're provocative.
You are provocative. So that can bring blame into one, a survivor or whoever has experienced sexual assault or trauma.
Yeah. So many people, we off air, we were having a conversation just with the team, and but why did you react in that manner, right? Or why didn't you react in this manner? So reactions, I think, are something that confuses people to this day. Shouldn't you just scream, run for the hills, and go to the police or tell somebody close to you? There's a very stringent idea of how a victim of sexual assault is supposed to behave after they have undergone that assault, right? So many people don't understand what we call a freeze response, right? Can you explain what that is and what happens when...
Yeah, so I was actually going to share that. We have the 3 Fs.
Okay.
It's flight, freeze, or fight.
Okay.
But it's not all the time that your mind will automatically remind you, now it's time to fight.
To do the logical thing.
The logical thing. Because the way our mind was made, Ross, is to protect us. So there are times where something happens to you immediately and you are numb.
Yeah.
Before you will fight eventually, but you will be numb first. Then you snap out of it, you're like, oh, actually I'm supposed to fight.
Yeah.
Or I'm supposed to run.
Yeah.
So these 3 reactions, they're not automatic, and actually it takes a while for them to kick in.
Yeah.
Or for you to actually recognize that, oh, I'm numb.
Okay.
Or I am.
So they might not even all happen at the same time in succession.
They might not happen at the same time. You might not recognize them at the time when they're happening.
Okay.
So you might be numb now and then realize later,
yeah. Yeah. And for some people that looks like consent, but you didn't fight.
Exactly. So it happens a lot with people who experience trauma, people who experience sudden, attack action.
Yeah.
Respond. So response is not always about defending yourself or how well you know how to defend yourself.
Yeah.
It's an emotion, and it just comes at the time that particular incident is happening.
Yeah. Sorry, Cathy, but just to follow up on that question, right? Because you run a center where you have spoken to people who've gone through these experiences, right? Have you noticed the difference in that triple F response in men versus in women? Do they react differently?
I would say yes and no.
Okay.
Because with most of the people that I work with at the center, they have experienced similar things.
Okay.
And most of sexual victims, sexual assault victims, it's normally freeze.
Yeah.
Most of them.
Yeah.
Yes. And then if it's somebody who was forced maybe into drugs, because we also work with like addicts, recovering addicts, then you find that it's a fight mode. They go into fight mode first and then freeze mode. So there's no pattern.
Okay.
And then we can't really say, certain victims would rather fight than freeze.
Okay.
So like I said, emotions just, happen.
Well, speaking about responses, Pearl, we know that time is of the essence after this incident has happened, because also in terms of the evidence as well, and I think this one is quite a hard one, because you're not supposed to shower because you want the evidence on you, right? So I want to talk a little bit about reporting, because this has come up as an issue time and again to say, the common question is, why didn't people report? Or why did they delay in reporting? What are some of the reasons why this happens?
Well, I'm going to go back again to shame and blame. There are a lot of younger women, I'll say younger women because we work mostly with women than men, who have experienced sexual assault and they are going through sexual traumas alone by themselves.
Yeah.
Reason being that they don't know the processes. They don't understand the process, the legal process, of if I report, where I'm going to be blamed, or what are the police going to say? People are going to know that so and so is saying, Mamang or my uncle did this to me. So a lot of people stay in and suffer with trauma because of fear, because of not knowing the processes, the legal processes. Of the rape cases. A lot of women that we have also at the center have always come to us and say, because I don't know, they might interrogate me, they might ask me to show proof which I don't have. And all of those reasons make them to keep on. And, I'm so glad that at Raton Center we had introduced legal services for our community and the clients that come through. Just because of the assessment, one of the reasons why people hold back is because of the fear and the unknown process.
Even the attention. I'll share an experience with you, a personal experience. When I was in high school, there was a teacher who was really, really popular amongst us. We loved him. I loved him. He was the cool teacher, right? And one day on a sports day, he pulled me aside and he told me about how he had a sexual dream about me, and we did all these things in the dream, and then he woke up and he told his wife about it. And in that moment I experienced what you've just been talking about, Pearl, the freeze response, because my mind at that point had started reeling so much that I couldn't fathom what was going on, and I could have walked away, could have immediately gone and told another teacher that this guy just, but it was my limited understanding in my 16, 17-year-old brain at the time to say, but he didn't touch you.
Yeah.
But he didn't do anything to you. And because he's one of the most beloved teachers at school, you're going to report this and say what? And then he's going to get in trouble and everybody's going to look at you like the girl who got Mr. So-and-so fired or, falsely accused him of, well, if he didn't touch her, then what was the problem?
Yeah.
So, and I didn't want all that attention. I didn't want to be known as the girl who reported this, that, and the third. I just didn't want the stigma that came with all of it. And I wanted to bury it. And psychologically, I think I succeeded in burying it, because I think a year or two later, I had buried it so deeply that I had forgotten his name. It took me until years later to remember that there was that guy. I remembered him, but I forgot his name. That's how deeply I pushed it down. So it was just that attention to say, but I have never been spoken to by either my parents or my teachers to say, if something like this happens to you, it is sexual assault and this is what you need to do about it. So, think of how many people that's happened to.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Extremely interesting. And yeah.
Yeah, 10:46 is your time on Gabs FM, Power to Engage Your World. This is a conversation about not only sexual trauma, but we will arrive at intimacy after sexual trauma, because we're humans. Intimacy is a part of our daily life experiences, but it is not easy as, it can be for one person that it is for the next person. And we're going to talk about that on the other side of this. If you're listening to this conversation, thank you for joining us and welcome. +267 3956 962 is our WhatsApp line. You can send us a message or a voice note to ask a question, make a comment, share an experience. Anything is fine. You can also give us a call on the other side of this. We have Pearl Ncube, affectionately known as Miss Pearl, and she's the founder and executive director of Ratong Center, right? Join our conversation. 10:47 is your time on the Purple Playroom. Good evening. This is Santana Wyclef John on Maria, bringing us to 10:51 on Gabs FM, Power to Engage Your World. So I had the privilege of seeing Wyclef live, right?
Really?
Yes, I did last year. So he started this, or he factored the song into the set, and he started off by saying, "Listen, I love you, DJ Khaled, but this is my song." And he started the song, which I thought was really cool. I'll always remember that. But 10:52 is your time on Gabs FM, Power to Engage Your World. Welcome to the Purple Playroom. This is the show about sex, because if it's about sex, we're talking about it, right? It's hosted by myself and my beautiful friend Cathy. And this evening we've gone into a very sensitive one, and I don't know the statistics. Maybe Miss Pearl will help us to say what's the percentage of, or statistics of people who have experienced sexual assault at least, once in their lives. I think women, unfortunately, it has occurred more than men. But don't you ever wonder to say, but there hasn't been a woman who hasn't been spoken to sideways, or, commented on sexually, touched inappropriately, had their breasts fondled, had their bum smacked, something.
Yeah.
Do you ever wonder about that?
But I really don't think it's just women.
Yeah.
I actually think men are just as much molested, but they are A, not aware, and B, never going to report.
Yeah.
So I think that sexual molestation is something that happens, like we've said, not necessarily maybe even going as far as penetration, but especially, remember when we had the conversation about, I think we were talking about men and sex, and the thing that came back was that a lot of men, their first time is with an older woman.
Yes, and they're underage.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, in fact, I always wonder about those dynamics, because especially when there's an age difference, how much say does that young person have to an older person? Is he able to say, I want us to use a condom? Is he able to say, I don't want to do this?
Yeah.
Can he say no?
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that I think a lot of the time, also because women are vocal, I've heard a man say, can you imagine me going to the police station to report that I was raped? Whew,
because they've been laughed out of a police station before.
So it's unfortunate, because even whatever statistics that Ms. Pearl might be able to share with us, we are all aware that for every, I think it's 1:7, for every one case that happens, the other 7 are not reported. So one that it gets reported and the other 7 are not. And for men, I actually believe the statistics might be, for every one that gets reported, it's 100,
that don't, right?
Because I don't think men really report. So it's really quite a sad situation. But coming back to Ms. Pearl, and thank you again for being here. I think we are really interested in the impact that trauma has on intimacy, because I think one of the things, and I think we call it flashbacks, but it's basically part of the work that you do with your neuro-linguistic programming to say the psychological approach, the set of techniques that are used in terms of focusing on the relationship between neurological processes. It's a language, basically. Yes. There are patterns that your brain follows. And so that's what we want to find out, to say, if you've gone through this trauma, right, and then something, or say you are in the process of getting intimate, your brain most likely starts to follow that pattern of, this danger, this has happened, this. So how do you go about, coming out of that? How do you go about changing that as somebody who's a survivor?
Dealing with sexual trauma, it's a gradual process. And it's something that will require a lot of therapy, especially from professional help, like professional therapists. But again, it's it needs one to acknowledge and identify with it. You know, you have to know what you're going through for you to deal with it. And a lot of times people fail to identify what they are going through or what impact it had on them. And that is where the challenge would be. But if one can find professional help and go through, you know, proper tools and guidelines that can help them to deal with that, it's always helpful. I also wanted to share an experience that I had as a survivor of rape. I was raped at 17, and I got married when I was 27. It happened that my ex-husband was a very playful person. So the incident of my rape, there was no consent, and the person had pushed me down, used me the way they wanted, and then took 100 pula note and a piece of tissue and threw it at me. So that, firstly, it affected the way I deal with money. You know, whether...
Wow.
Yes. Normally when I am in a relationship and somebody wants to give me money and they're not happy, or you want to give me money recklessly and throw it to me, it affects me.
It triggers you.
It triggers me. So this particular time, you know, my husband came into the house and I was just cleaning
Was
up.
he aware of your experience?
He was aware, but I don't think I had told him in
The
detail.
details, okay.
You know, when you meet someone, you're like, oh yeah, this is
Yeah.
what I went through.
Yeah.
And I went through counseling. And again, with sexual trauma, you get to a point where you think you've healed.
So you don't know the extent of things that could trigger you.
Yes, because there's the environment, the smell, you know, that can trigger you.
Yeah.
And it happened that he comes home and I'm there just folding clothes in the lounge, playfully pushes me on the couch and starts tickling me.
Yeah.
And try and forces to kiss me.
Yeah.
I don't know what had happened there. I got into fight mode.
Yeah.
I kicked, I screamed, I said, never do that again. I banged the doors.
Yeah.
You know, that is when I went up and into the room and I sat down. I cried and I said, but why did I behave that way?
Yeah.
You know, I have gone through this, I've healed. But I remembered then that the last time somebody did that to me, my mind was saying, then this happened. The painful thing happened. And we sat down, we talked about it. He said, you need to go back to counseling. And I was still a counselor then.
Yeah.
You know, he said, you need to go back to therapy because you have not dealt with this. And there will be certain times again where we're in the shop and I'm short of cash and he says, oh, take the $100. Oh my God. I say, don't you ever throw money at me.
Yeah.
And he says, you need to go back to therapy. So this is a gradual process. You can't put a timeline to it.
Yeah.
But it needs one to be very intentional.
And you
about
can't
the healing.
outlive it with time. You need the counseling.
Time
Yes.
doesn't
Yeah.
heal all wounds.
Yeah.
like
And you know,
people
with
say.
counseling, it doesn't mean that the trauma is removed.
Yes.
You forget about
Yes.
it. But it's the weight that it affects you.
Yeah.
And also is the way that you will deal with it when a certain incident, environment, smell faces and reminds you of that trauma.
Yeah.
So I would really say it's very important that one becomes intentional about their healing and identify what triggers them.
Okay, so somebody's listening to this conversation or somebody will watch this conversation on our YouTube channel eventually who has gone through a sexual trauma. And they're wondering to themselves whether it happened recently or whether it happened a long time, but they've not been able to really have, a life that consists of healthy intimacy since then. Can a survivor of sexual assault, Pearl, develop a healthy and fulfilling sex life at some point?
Definitely. I used to think that I will not heal.
Yeah.
Because I did not enjoy sex. First, I didn't enjoy sex because I would not reach an orgasm.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because for me, it was like, sex is for men. Let him finish and
Yeah.
go and
Yeah.
leave me alone.
Yeah.
You know? But I am at a point now where I've worked so much on myself that I know that sex is pleasure.
Yes. And is meant to be enjoyed by whoever's in the act.
It creates a beautiful connection between two people when it's not forced, when it's consented for.
Yeah.
And I've learned that intimacy is not only penetration, it's also holding the hands, it's the tickling, it's the gifts, it's the appreciation, it's the words. So it took me long, but I'm proud of where I am now, because I don't think 10, 15 years ago, I would be with any man.
So then
angry.
I'm sure it must be, because I think we talk about, but your partner just generally knows that you suffered a trauma before, right? But I think, many people, one of the results of sexual trauma might be, now I'm damaged goods. Who's going to want me once they know that I've been through such an ordeal, and I could like somebody, genuinely like them, but what comes with being in a relationship with somebody, the majority of the time means intimacy is going to play a part, right? So I can like you as a woman, Cathy can be into you, Pearl can be into you, Ross can be into you, but not be ready to go there. So then, from what you've experienced in your practice at Ratong Center as well, how do you coach people through sharing with a person who they are getting close to, or listen, I've been through something?
And not just sharing, I actually want to throw this in there, like coming off of the previous question, to say, if your brain already has these patterns and you already normally go there because, watch out, danger, how do you rewire that? What are the ways that you change the language that when you have A happen, it doesn't mean B, C, D, E, F?
When someone comes up behind you maybe and hugs you,
Yes. So, like I said, Cathy, I wouldn't say it any other way, but therapy is very helpful, because when you are going to see a counselor, you're seeing somebody who is trained, to help rewire. You are seeing somebody who is empathetic, somebody who understands the impact, the negative impact that experience would have, caused in your life. So it is possible for one to work on themselves, but I would always recommend that, yes, by themselves. But I always recommend that look for professional help, so that you are able, healing, yes, we can't put a time on it, but if you start early, you can actually, know how to comprehend the emotions, know how to deal with the triggers when they come. Also, just help yourself rewire. I use a lot of music, affirmations, nature, and like I say, affirmations.
Different things work for different people,
things
right?
work for different people. Yes, I say nature, but somebody may say, I was assaulted in the bush and it doesn't work for me.
Okay.
You see? I say music. I've had a client, my apologies if they may be listening. It's a very elderly lady who had shared with me that she does not eat beef, and I went down to say, well, it wasn't about the beef during the counseling session.
Okay.
But she explained to me that now in her quiet days after retirement, the kids are gone, she's an empty nester. She keeps having flashbacks of what happened back then when she was only standard 2. In the village, all the way, up north, everyone will go to the school, and then there's an uncle who'll take her and say, and rape her in the crawl. And the only thing she would see when she's on the ground
is
cows looking at her. And that affected her to a point where everyone thinks, but it's because of how, she's
her association with her assault and what she,
Yes. So for her, Ratong Center has a farm now in Buka.
Yeah.
And part of the thing that we are doing is horticulture as a therapy.
Yes.
Petting of animals.
That is not for her.
Yeah.
It's not for her.
Yeah.
And she said to me, ha ke rate kgomo. Kgomo ke sengwe se e leng mo Botswana, we take it.
That's our thing.
That's our thing.
Yeah.
But if I wasn't a therapist, if I didn't take time to understand and unpack it, I would have said to her, o rata dilo itharo le kgoa. So another thing I want to say is pacing intimacy. If you're in a relationship and you have a partner or they have experienced sexual trauma or sexual assault, or they're going through the sexual trauma itself, you need to pace the intimacy. You know, right? They are very active sexually. They have a love language. Touch, gifting, and all that. You need to understand exactly what your partner has gone through, so that when you approach them, you know, it's paced.
Yeah.
When you approach them, it's mindful. Why it's whatever that will trigger her strong. You know, it might trigger them. And communicate, open communication. If you practice open communication, where you can ask the partner, are you ready? How are you feeling? You know, I'm not ready. But you try different things, you know, so that your partner can be comfortable. And open communication, you see, this is how I'm feeling. I'm also a sexual being. I feel like, can we try it this way? How would you like to try it?
Yeah. You know, that communication, or how as well, before we go into what partners can actually actively do once they learn that their partner or somebody they're interested in has been through sexual assault. Ladies, it takes me back to how little we monitor what children think about certain things. So we think sometimes because we haven't actively taught them about something that they don't know about it. But the internet is alive and thriving. Both the good side and the dark side. You know, television is alive and thriving. Multimedia is accessible to young kids. And I was near some children not so long ago, maybe a couple of months ago, 2 boy children. They could be around 9-10 years old, right? That young. And they go to school together. So they were discussing, this was after school, and they were discussing ecosystem the social circle, right? And the conversation was, you know, I would consider them naughty boys. They're mischievous, right? But nothing that they have or that they had ever said really concerned me, except one day they were talking about a girl that one of them liked, right? And one of the other boys, I think they were arguing over, you know, their crushes on the same girl. And one of them said, no, but you can have her anyway. I don't like a girl who's used.
What?
That's
9,
what they
10.
said. Yeah. I don't like a girl who's used. So when, you know, I stopped in my tracks and I looked at them, I said, usually I ignore what they say. But I said, boys, what are you talking about used? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, no, the kids aren't having sex yet. They're 9, 10. You know, I would know if these particular ones were. I don't think that they are. Boys, what do you mean used? No, it's just that she's already had her heart broken by some other guy. So I just feel like she's, you know. So if 9, 10-year-olds feel like somebody who's already had a heartbreak and it wasn't him who broke her heart, or he wasn't involved in whatever she went through emotionally with that, and he feels like she's used, that might play in, you know, an adult man's mind to say, well, I don't want a woman who's been with X amount of guys. I don't want a woman who has suffered a trauma sexually or who has been raped, or, you know, and that kind of thing. I want her to be pure. Do we find that culturally we are having those issues? You both can comment on that to say, you know, in our society in general, do we look at people like that, and do, you know, men in particular as well look at women like that to say,
I've actually had an experience recently where somebody sent me a message that would have triggered me. You know, when they were talking and they got to a point where they said, I'm very difficult.
Okay.
But the way killing difficult, a baggage. You know, you are divorced, you have 2 children, you are always talking on radio about how you were once raped. So for a person, and I said, I think you do not have capacity to handle everything I'm bringing. So that question, Ross, it's very rightful, because these are things that are actually out there where we're being labeled.
But you know,
And yes,
my whole thing is, and this has been for me since I started to get very intentional about healing. It's not an easy journey. And what I've realized is that not as many people are on that journey. So once you remember, I don't know, in my head or my heart, I always just remember that hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, and I mean, the experiences that some of us have had, you just have to offer that person grace and remember that hurt
It's more
people
about
hurt-
them than it is about you.
Hurt people hurt
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And there's so many things that happen right now. You're talking about 10-year-olds, not wanting somebody because
They're
they've
damaged.
right? But at the
Or
same time,
their words were a used girl.
yes.
but if you look at it and you look at what's going on currently, even like we spoke about in our first couple of episodes, to say this sex culture we have where we just hook up and have sex and
Yeah.
it's very random. All of these kind of things, that's not a behavior of somebody who's not hurt. I think our society manifests. It's already showing that there's a lot of hurt that's going on.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it's not, if you're on a healing journey, and I believe that you get tested, but I also believe you get to attract the energy that's similar to yours. So it's just one of those.
Oh, yeah. Very interesting. Can be somewhat heavy conversation that we are having, all right? We have already, but we'll do it again. Just put out a trigger warning to say the conversations might make you feel a kind of way if you have had certain experiences or know people who have had, certain experiences. We do apologize for that and are working very hard to be as empathetic as possible throughout this conversation, all right? It
But
is
Ross,
with...
I'd actually like to say to the listener that
Yeah.
if they have, because this show I think is so important and is so necessary. So if you've had this experience, whether male or female, because again, I think men don't talk about it, but if you want to, you can go ahead and send a message on our WhatsApp line. It's +267 3956 962. You can also call in studio. I mean, it's so beautiful to have Pearl here and be available to look at whatever issues you have and would like to address, or if you've had an experience and you're not sure if that was abuse, assault, go ahead and call in. The studio line is 3956 and we'll give out details. We'll get Pearl to share the Ratong details at the end of the conversation as well.
100%. 13 minutes past 11 is your time on Gabs FM, power to engage your world. We are having this discussion all the way till 12 midnight. So if you can stick around, please do. If you cannot, then we'll see you on YouTube next week, Tuesday. All right. Good night in advance if that's you. All right. We're going to take a short break and then be back on the other side of this with Pearl Ncube, otherwise known as Miss Pearl, founder and executive director of Ratong Center. Good evening and welcome to the Purple Playroom. A soul classic by Soul for Real featuring Heavy D. It's called Candy Rain, the remix, bringing us to 11:21 on Gabs FM, power to engage your world. Thank you so much for still being with us. If you are still with us, this is the Purple Playroom. It's a show about sex, because if it's about sex, we're talking about it, all right? It's hosted by myself. My name is Ross, and I hosted with my good friend and colleague, Ms. Cathy Malejane. We're joined this evening by Miss Pearl Ncube, who is a trauma, what do we call them? A trauma-informed counselor, right? She is the founder and executive director of Ratong Center, where you can get counseling of that nature. I think before we, close off our discussion, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, maybe there's now somebody listening to this conversation who's not a trauma survivor, but is an intimate partner of somebody who is. Okay, would you advise that that person not only be patient with their partner, and patient is relative, right?
Yeah.
But would you advise that they also get counseling? Do they need counseling?
Yes, they need counseling because if you are supporting somebody who has been through any trauma, not just sexual trauma, you need to know how to not handle them, how to support them. Let's put it that way,
and how to live with
and
them.
how to live with it, because sometimes a survivor of trauma can also affect their partner. You can end up bleeding on them.
Yes.
So you need to be able to have the tools knowing that, okay, if they're emotional today, if they're,
it's not
feeling this way,
me.
it's not about me.
Yeah.
And, I can give them space. This is what I can do to make them feel better. These are the kind of words that I can use. Because sometimes if you are dealing with somebody who's been through trauma, and you are tired, you are from work, or you need the attention, and they are going, oh, I don't feel like it today. You can also retaliate and use words that can make it worse.
Sometimes we catch each other on a bad day, Pearl.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's life.
Yeah. So I would support that if your partner is going for counseling or they have not been to counseling and they wish to do so, please go with them so that you can also get the tools and you can also get the guidance of how to deal and how to support a trauma survivor.
So you said communication, right, is a very important part of it, and you're saying also do your very best to support your partner if you can go for that counseling with them, right? I'd like us to, before now we talk about enthusiastic consent, because I think that's a very important one. I'd like us to speak to both the person that is going through this trauma or has gone through this trauma and their partner, and just share some of the practices. Like you said, not everything is for everyone, right? But also just talk to us about some of the things that need to be a norm in that relationship, because I think also just in terms of having a healthy relationship, give us an idea of what that looks like for somebody who is a survivor of this.
Yes, that's a very important one, Cathy. And I would say open communication would be the key, because with communication you will get to understand your partner's needs, your partner's fears, your partner's love language, and what intimacy looks like to them. And the practical things can be maybe finding hobbies that you both enjoy, you are both comfortable with. There's certain times where we counsel people and they have had a sexual trauma, and you find that another partner is interested in such kind of music in the house, and it irritates the other person because it brings flashback of whatever experience. So it's a very sensitive thing to deal with somebody who's been through trauma, but be mindful and also listening to what triggers them, understanding what the triggers are and the height of the reaction of your partner, because also it can show you if they are healing, if they are still struggling to heal. Then you can recommend counseling. You can recommend for them to find a support structure that works for them.
Right.
Yes.
So when we talk about, and maybe this will take us back a little bit, but I don't believe that we covered it in depth, right? Perhaps we can just go back there briefly, is the behaviors. A trauma can alter your brain, right? So let's talk about the behaviors that can manifest after a person has experienced a sexual trauma. A sexual trauma in specific, and not just any kind of trauma. But that. I know one as being hypersexuality. I think they call it nymphomania.
Yes.
Or I think that's the word, right? So that's the one I know of. Now, instead of actually what you would think the response would be them completely never wanting to engage in sex ever again, now they overdo it. So what kind of behaviors can manifest as a result of sexual trauma?
Actually, the one we're talking about here, it normally happens to sexual assault survivors who have experienced or been exposed to sex from a very younger age. Yes. So other behaviors could be lack of low erection for men, lack of interest in sex. I would also like to share my personal one. It took me a very long time, to actually be sexually active, and even after my divorce, it took me such a long time because you lose trust, and to rebuild the trust, it takes a long time because you want somebody who understands that I want to be touched this way, this is how, you the spot. For me to actually reach an orgasm, it's when you have kissed before the actual penetration and all that. So to rebuild the trust takes a long time, but with the open communication, like I said, I'll still say that you will be able to understand that your partner feels this way, and this is how, it softened them, because with sex, the mind has to be calm, the body also has to be calm for you to have a connection, right? And then that's when maybe the person can reach orgasm. I can't remember all of the behaviors at the top of my head, but low reaction, lack of intimacy, also anxiety. Some people experience anxiety when it's the time now to have the intimacy happening, and they know you are close to penetration and all that. So
just a sense of dread to say, oh no,
here we go again,
not this again.
Yes, because the mind is so powerful. It will always remind you that the last time we had this, then the next thing was pain. Now it's time for you to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And it can be pacing. You can start having pacing thoughts and not concentrate at all. I remember there was a time in my relationship where somebody says,
yeah, you're just
not
kind
there.
of lying there.
Yes.
You're not participating.
Because for me, I didn't understand that actually it's two people connecting.
Yeah.
I thought I just have to lay there and they pleasure themselves.
I consented, so what more? Yeah.
So so it requires intention. It requires a lot of work from oneself and the partner as well, to be able to get to a point where you can be both supportive to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I say supportive to each other because even if you're a trauma survivor, you need to also understand that your partner is also a sexual being.
Yeah.
They have the needs. Yeah. So if in your healing, you have to find spaces, time, moments where you can also accommodate them and say, it's not for you to hurt me, it's not for you to trigger me. Let's try it this way.
Right.
Yeah.
I think this is a beautiful segue, Ross, for us to then focus on the issue of enthusiastic consent, right? And just getting an understanding of what that looks like and why that's something that's so important, especially when...
What is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So, consent is very different. I will start by saying consent, if you're not in a relationship with them, it needs to be understood. And people need to understand that with consent also there's still boundaries.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean when somebody has said, yes, I like you, it means you can do whatever you want to them. You can touch them, you can say certain words that can bring, I think, I was having a conversation the other day with somebody where I said, nowadays, what hata go tsena in a relationship? Because the first thing somebody says to you is, ke rata mabele a gago. Yes, I said we can talk. Yes, I gave you my contact. But I didn't give you consent to say...
We're now getting sexually acquainted with each other.
We will get there, but not
maybe.
Now. Maybe. So, consent, it really varies, and it needs to be understood, clearly, because a lot of people think if I have your contact, it means I can do anything, I can say anything. If I have paid a drink for you, if I have paid a meal for you, it means I can do anything or everything to you. So it's very important to know that even if consent is given, there's still boundaries.
Yeah.
There may be soft boundaries where somebody allows you to touch and kiss them. There may be hard boundaries where there's distance. And you need to understand and reflect and say, and
that even when consent is given, it can even be revoked. We can get to the point where we are in the bed and we're naked.
Yes.
And one of us decides.
I actually wanted to talk about that, to say, if as you're going along and you change your mind, right?
Yes.
That still counts.
It still counts.
100%.
Yes. And somebody needs to understand that it's not because motho batla go mo bakisa.
Yeah. I'm not teasing you.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's because how they are feeling internally, and you can never tell, what people have experienced, and you can never tell, I'm saying both women and men, because we have men who come and say, and they've rubbed me, and we ended up doing it.
Yeah.
But I didn't want.
Yeah.
I didn't want to. So it means somebody has overstepped the boundary.
Yeah.
Have not, listened or waited for consent.
Wait, so you're actually bringing, and this has been something that I know there's been debate about, because you're saying this man didn't want, he didn't give consent. Because at some point I remember, and it was being ridiculed, but a man can be raped. how do you rape a man?
Because he reacts physically.
So
but even if
the
he gets an
conversation-
erection, women can also get lubricated while being raped. It doesn't mean they wanted it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I wanted actually to get you to speak a little bit to that, because I think that also, especially when we talk about that shame, when we spoke about how victims carry that shame, a lot of men have that, but I had an erection.
Yeah.
So was it really
So she must
rape?
have thought that
So
I
I'd really
wanted.
like you to just speak a little bit to that, to say, even for men, right? Even if you say no and that person, like you said, touches you, rubs you, it's still rape.
It's still rape, and I think we should really stress that one out. I mean, stress on it, because people think sexual assault only happens to women, and because I'm here, I'm a woman, it's probably going to be basadi ba nna hela ba rape. There is a lot of men also, in the workplaces, where they come and they say, "Kana na supervisor Rami is always, touching me, is always saying lift me going home," and they touch my thighs, and I don't like it. There is a gentleman that I was counseling who I give a respectful mo phone, but therefore LGBTQ. Yes. So
That's okay to mention.
yes, and the gentleman was saying, she can make me straight. And she was on that boy's case where he ended up having to leave work. He was taking antidepressants because
He dreaded going to work, and she had power over him.
and she had power
work.
over him, and every single day how is you haven't tasted a woman, and this guy was saying, "You are beautiful, but I'm just not for
But also remote tirong, above everything.
So he had,
And you're my boss.
He did not report.
And you're my boss,
Yeah,
actually.
he did not report. It took him so long to actually come out and seek support. And he said, I want to deal with the trauma.
Yeah.
So that I can live in peace.
Okay, so going on the back of Cathy's initial question, consent, right? Kana, we don't like to take these things as buzzwords because there's a meaning behind them, right? So, there's consent and then there's enthusiastic consent, right? Can you describe to me, Pearl, a scenario where there's enthusiastic consent and where there's not? What is enthusiastic consent? And does
What's
it
the
mean that
difference?
even when we're in a relationship, every single time we engage in some kind of intimate act, we have to ask each other? Is that what it means?
Yes, I think in some way, like I said earlier, when you're in a relationship, you need to understand each other. Because communication also we cannot rely on it as word of mouth. Sometimes it's, if you're in a relationship and your partner is visiting you, is to check how they're feeling. See also their reaction, how they are. And I think people also confuse when you're in a relationship, it should be
A given that
it's a given.
Yeah, we can kiss, we can touch, we can have sex.
We can have sex.
Yeah.
So it's a challenging one in married couples as well, where a lot of people say there's no marital rape. There is
Tota
no
ebile the
way.
Constitution doesn't
law actually
recognize
doesn't recognize
marital
it as
rape.
marital rape.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's conjugal rights, and if you are in a relationship, if we have lived together in a homestead for 9 years and we have kids together, it's conjugal rights. We are going there, and it's very important to understand the consent, and know that if somebody says we can kiss and all that, they can still change their mind and say, I don't feel like it anymore. Instead of going ahead or pushing them, maybe be mindful and ask questions, that are supportive. Okay, maybe I was overreacting because trauma, when you are dealing with trauma, it's like we hallucinate.
Yeah.
Your partner can touch you and then you feel like awful. And then if you are talking about it and you are sitting down, you can actually come back and consent, or me, I overreacted, or me, now I'm feeling ready. So people need to understand. I know that for a listener out there must be thinking, hey,
Yeah.
Because once you are in a relationship,
We're married.
you are married.
That I have to ask you. Yeah.
But it affects one's psychological being. It affects one's lifestyle. It affects a lot of things in the home, even in the relationship.
And not just a survivor of sexual assault.
Not a survivor.
We're not saying you need enthusiastic consent from someone who's been assaulted. From everyone.
From everyone. You are in a relationship. It's in a workplace. You know, you need to understand that hamoto asabate areno. You know, don't use your powers because you are a senior person. Don't use your powers because you have more money or you have more resources than them.
Yeah.
You know,
and don't think just because you haven't been touched. It was just advances, verbal advances, right? Verbal harassment. Don't think just because you haven't been touched is not a big deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think, somebody listening who has been, gone through this has gotten quite a lot. I think we need to get you, Pearl, to just speak to that person, especially in terms of giving them hope. I'd like the idea of saying to you, even if you've gone through sexual assault and you've, are experiencing or have experienced trauma, I'd like you to just give them a message of encouragement to say, you can move past that. You can get to a point where you enjoy sexual intimacy and, life goes on.
And that somebody will love you.
Right?
Yeah, you're not damaged goods.
Yes. And, I want to really express this because I am a survivor of sexual assault. I'm a survivor of sexual trauma. And some parts of me, some days, are reminded of what had happened. But it's how I deal with it now that helps me to keep going. And I just want to say, to listeners out there, please know that you are worthy. No matter what has happened to you, just know that you are still human. You are still as beautiful. It might just be an emotion, that comes often, that, gives you that feeling of shame, that gives you a feeling of doubting yourself, looking yourself in the mirror and thinking, please seek help. It might not be professional help, but we do have in the community. We have churches, we have support structures, social, support structures. Just find a safe space and somebody that you trust that you can speak to. And, I open up also at Raton Center. It's a community center. Services are free. We provide counseling. We have group sessions, group counseling sessions. If you have a counselor one-on-one, we have
like a support group.
A support group where you can come and hear other women and men who've actually been through that and how they've managed to overcome, to surpass those emotions. And we walk with you through this journey. So wherever you are, if you are somebody somebody who's going through this and they cannot comprehend, they are struggling, please find help on their behalf. Bring them, take them, to centers in your community. Listen to this show. I think it's a very educational show.
Yeah.
And I'm excited that today we go to open up and speak about such things because they are a reality. There is no way we can separate sex from our normal day of life.
Yeah. Her name is Miss Tsenolo Pearl Ncube. She's a social entrepreneur, founder and executive director of Ratong Center and co-founder of Botswana Palliative Care Association, and a sexual trauma survivor, sexual assault survivor. So I hope if this is something that you've been through, you're feeling validated by someone who's saying, I've been through this, I went through this when I was 17 years old, I'm at the age that I am now, and it's still not a linear process. I still do go through things. A smell can trigger me, a touch can trigger me, but there is help that you can get. I think I wanted to get to this part of the conversation where there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and that's what we were trying to do, right? We were trying to say there is hope for you even on the other side of that, and you can definitely get past whatever has happened to you. I don't know, Pearl, if there's any other words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the listener, because I say to you a lot of the time that I think you are living your purpose, because the times that I've met you and spoken to you, I'm just constantly in awe. Really, this woman went through this, and yet, are doing so much to make sure that people who've gone through such situations, people who are recovering from substance abuse, people who are recovering from gender-based violence, get to find their feet again. And, you know, you've had your fair share of those happen to you and picked your feet up and kept it moving forward. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
You know, I'll always have something to say. I want to also remind the listeners out there that there is personal responsibility. You know, healing requires you, and you have to be very intentional about your healing. It's like going into a shop, grocery. Then you pack everything in the grocery, in the trolley. You walk away and expect to find food at home. You know, so you
have to see it through.
You have to see it through. It's not a very, you know, the most beautiful journey, but again, it's not the most ugliest. There is somewhat, you know, the beauty of it, because you find your strength. You get to understand yourself. You get to know. I found myself through my healing, you know, and I look right now. Cathy says I live my purpose. I am living in my purpose because I say if I did not go through everything, I wouldn't be here to understand what other people are going through in the community. So for me to start Raton Center is because I've been there and I knew that there was no support. I said, instead of being bitter, let me provide the support to others. So don't just sit and expect a therapist to find you. Find them, find yourself while you are finding them. You know, be responsible for whatever flaws, whatever, you know, shame, mistakes that you think you have done. But come to the table and confront yourself so that you can start your healing journey.
And speaking about starting our healing journey, how can we find Ratong Center? Where do we follow you guys? What is the number to contact if somebody is watching this? Yes,
Ratong Center is based here in Gaborone, in Broadhurst. We are in Piring, and our contact numbers are 72337399. That number is on WhatsApp line. We can use it to call, WhatsApp, send a message, request to see a counselor. And we're also on Facebook at Raton Center. We're on Instagram at Raton Center Botswana. We recently joined TikTok, Raton Center. And yes, you can contact us. Please come through. Let us walk with you through this journey.
Pearl, thank you so much for agreeing to come and have this conversation with us. It's not for us, but for whoever's watching this right now and whoever's going to come across it, whether, like we said, a survivor of trauma or somebody who loves somebody who is a survivor of trauma, a parent, a friend, a partner, whoever it is. We are all in the ecosystem and we are all involved. So thank you again so much, and have a lovely rest of your evening.
Thank you. Good
Wonderful. Good morning almost. Cathy, this is how we wrap up the show this evening. Any final thoughts?
I'm just excited by the idea that we've put this message out there, because I think healing is such an important thing to do. And, you know, the Purple Playroom is a show about sex, and so we could not do a show about sex and not talk about the reality on the ground in Botswana. So I'm very happy we managed to do this, and I so much look forward to seeing, you know, what the the viewer will say about it.
Okay. All right, let's wrap it up.
What are your last words? What are your highlights? What did you take away, Ms. Ross?
Okay, briefly before we wind up, what I took away is that we're not doing enough in the formative years for kids. Kids don't understand things. We're starting too late. So I like, in every situation, regardless of this, in every area of my life, I like to take a prevention versus cure approach to things. And I think where sexual assault is concerned, or the harmful narratives around them and the harmful norms, practices, and behaviors, we are not taking enough responsibility for kids, what they're being exposed to, what they think, do, and say. And I think it needs to start there. So yes, we can educate adults who it's more difficult for to unlearn certain things, but we've really got to look at kids and not shy away. Another huge conversation why this show, I feel like, is a calling for me, is I feel like we're not talking to kids about sex enough. They are old enough to hear about it in different ways at certain levels for their ages, right? There's obviously a limit to how explicit you can be, or, within their frame of understanding, there is something that they can understand. And I feel like we don't take the responsibility enough to learn, first of all, what that is, so that we can then pass down that information. So when we cover sex in a blanket of shame, guess what?
But the ironic thing is, much as we might say that, especially within the family setting, they just need to turn on the radio a lot of the times, and then switch on the TV, and then there's sex blaring at them.
That's what I'm talking about, to say they are learning it from the most harmful places, and the places where we have the least control over what they learn and how they learn it. So I think it's the shame of having a conversation with your own 9-year-old who has access to the internet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you would rather kind of turn a blind eye to it and think, if he's watching porn, he's watching porn. If she's watching porn, she's watching porn, but not have the guts to talk to your own child about sex and how they view other women. Your kid is out there telling his friends that girl is used. You know what I mean? So I think we're not taking an active enough role where children are concerned, and those are my final thoughts. All right? The Purple Playroom across all the social media platforms that you can think of: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, as well as YouTube, where you can find full episodes. Today's Tuesday, so one is definitely out. They are uploaded every single Tuesday. Check out that episode. This one, if you would like to see it, you're listening to this conversation right now, will be up next week, Tuesday, all right? Thank you so much for tuning in. Give us a follow, give us a like, and share our content as well. We appreciate you so much for joining the Purple Playroom. Good night.
Amo beats. But I guess that's just status, 'cause I make you stay. But I guess that's just